Imagine you are holding a small, totally sealed box in your hands.
Hmm.
And I am holding one too. In fact,
Yep.
like every single person walking the earth has their own box.
Right.
And we all agree to call whatever is inside this box a beetle.
Hmm.
We talk about our beetles constantly,
Yeah.
right? We describe how they're behaving, how they feel, how much they bother us or bring us joy.
Yeah, it's a completely normal part of daily conversation.
Exactly. But there is one unbreakable rule in this scenario. You can never, ever look inside my box. And I can never look inside yours. You only ever know what a beetle is by looking inside your own private container.
It creates this really immediate, almost claustrophobic sense of isolation when you really sit with that image. Because, I mean, my box could contain a spider, your box could contain a rock, someone else's box could be completely empty, or the thing inside it might be, like, constantly changing shape.
Yet we would all be using the exact same word.
Yeah.
We would be having entire conversations about beetles, assuming we were talking about the exact same reality, when physically we're entirely disconnected.
Yeah.
Like, you're walking around assuming my internal world looks like yours, but you have absolutely zero proof.
Which forces you to ask this massive question. If the actual physical thing inside your box is completely hidden from me, then when we use the word beetle, what are we actually talking about?
Well, yeah, what are we talking about?
Well, the word cannot possibly be referring to the hidden object. The hidden object, whatever it is, drops out of the equation entirely. The word only has meaning in the public space between us.
Wow. And that profound, deeply unsettling thought experiment is basically the launch pad for our deep dive today. We are looking at a huge stack of philosophical texts, historical analyses, and some seriously cutting-edge research on artificial intelligence.
Oh, yeah. It all connects.
And it all revolves around this single foundational question for you, the listener. When you speak, are you just labeling things in the world, or are you actively building the reality you live in?
It's such a huge concept. And to get to the bottom of that, we are looking at the life and work of Ludwig Wittgenstein.
The man, the myth.
Seriously. He is arguably the most radical, unusual thinker of the 20th century. You really cannot separate his philosophy from his extraordinary life trajectory. We are talking about a guy who essentially detonated the entire philosophical establishment, not once, but twice.
Let's set the stage with that first detonation, because the story is just wild. In his 20s, he writes this relatively short book, the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus.
Yeah, it rolls right off the tongue.
Right. But he doesn't just present it as, like, a new theory to be debated. He presents it as the final word.
Mm-hmm.
He believes he has literally solved every major problem of philosophy. Boom. Done. We can all go home now.
He was so fiercely convinced that he had completed the intellectual work of the human race that he literally quit.
He just walked away.
Walked away completely. He gave away a massive family fortune, like one of the largest fortunes in Europe at the time, and just vanished into rural Austria to become a primary school teacher.
Because what else do you do when you've solved the universe?
Exactly. He thought there was literally nothing left for him to do in the realm of human thought.
But the narrative doesn't end there. And the true genius of Wittgenstein isn't just that he built this monumental theory. It's that decades later, he comes back from the wilderness, returns to Cambridge, and spends the rest of his life meticulously, ruthlessly dismantling his own masterpiece.
Yeah.
He blows up his own legacy to create a second, entirely contradictory philosophy.
It is the most stunning intellectual self-correction on record. I mean, he moves from viewing language as this crystalline, rigid, perfectly logical picture of reality to realizing that language is actually a messy, fluid, highly social toolbox.
And the reason this matters to us today, the whole reason we are doing this deep dive, is because his theories provide the absolute best framework for understanding the crisis we are facing right now with large language models.
Absolutely. The AI connection is so strong here.
But we have to trace that evolution first.
Yeah.
Starting with the young, arrogant Wittgenstein who thought he solved the universe, the architect of logic.
Right. So he writes the Tractatus. And the core mission of this book was boundary setting. He really wanted to draw an absolute impenetrable line around sensical language.
Sensical meaning, like stuff that actually makes sense to say.
Yes, because he was looking at thousands of years of philosophical arguments, debates about the soul, about meaning, about the divine, and he just saw chaos.
Just people talking past each other.
Exactly. He believed this chaos existed because we didn't understand the limits of our own linguistic machinery.
Yeah.
So he developed what is known as the picture theory of language.
Okay, so when I first read picture theory in the sources, I imagined language as a literal painting. like words are brushing a visual landscape into my mind.
Sure, that's a common way to misinterpret it.
Right. But the texts are very specific. It's not a visual picture at all. It's a logical picture.
Right, it's a structural isomorphism.
Oh boy, okay.
That's the technical term he uses, and it is crucial to understand the mechanics of it. An isomorphic model just means there is a strict one-to-one correspondence between the structure of the model and the structure of the reality it represents.
Okay, let's build an analogy here to make sure we are really nailing the mechanics of this for the listener.
Yeah, okay.
Think of a meticulously scaled architectural blueprint of a house.
Okay, good.
The blueprint isn't a visual painting of the house.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't show you the color of the siding or the texture of the living room carpet. But the geometry of the lines on the paper corresponds exactly to the physical walls that will be built in the real world.
Right, the proportions map perfectly.
Exactly. If there is a 2-inch gap between lines on the paper, there will be a doorway in the physical room.
That is a highly functional way to look at it. The syntax of your sentence, like, the actual way the words are arranged must mirror the geometry of the physical facts in the world.
So give me a practical example of that.
Take a really simple proposition. The cup is on the table. You have elements representing the cup, the table, and the spatial relationship between them. If the arrangement of those words logically maps onto the physical arrangement of those objects in reality, the proposition is true.
And if it doesn't map, it's false.
Exactly.
But, and here's where the absolute limit comes in, if you draw a line on that blueprint that corresponds to absolutely nothing in the physical world, it isn't just a false line. Reference.
And Wittgenstein applies this ruthlessly to language. If a sentence does not even have the potential to map onto physical, verifiable facts in the world, then strictly speaking, it is nonsense. It lacks sense.
Which produces this breathtaking, incredibly famous conclusion of his. The limits of my language mean the limits of my world.
And he is not speaking metaphorically there at all. He is arguing that logic is not just some human invention we use to describe things. Logic is the invisible scaffolding of the universe itself. If you cannot logically structure a thought in language, that thought physically cannot exist in your world. The boundaries of what can be articulated are the literal boundaries of what can be experienced.
So he draws this massive, heavy line in the sand. On one side is what can be said, the natural sciences, factual reporting. Water boils at 100 degrees, the car is red, things we can objectively verify.
Right.
But on the other side of the line is everything else. And the sources point out this deeply mystical distinction he makes between what can be said and what can only be shown.
Yeah, look at what gets pushed to the other side of that line. Ethics, aesthetics, the meaning of life, even the concept of logic itself.
Wait, logic itself is on the other side?
Yeah. Wittgenstein dictates that you cannot say anything meaningful about these things. You cannot map goodness or beauty onto physical, primitive objects in the world.
So, by his own rules, writing a dense philosophical treatise on ethics is producing literal nonsense.
According to the Tractatus, yes, it is literal nonsense.
But he doesn't mean nonsense as an insult, right? Like, he isn't saying ethics are garbage or pointless.
Oh, far from it. He held those things in the highest possible regard. He simply believed they belonged to the realm of the unsayable. They lack sense in his strict, formal definition because they don't picture physical facts.
Okay, I see.
These higher truths cannot be articulated in propositions, but they make themselves manifest in the world. They are shown through human action, through art, through how we conduct our lives. You can't speak them, you just show them.
To explain this boundary, the text brings up this mind-bending thought experiment about the eye and the visual field. And I want to walk through the mechanics of this because it absolutely blew my mind.
It's one of his best metaphors.
Okay, think about your field of vision at this exact moment. You can see the space around you, the light, the objects. But what is the one physical thing in your visual field that you absolutely cannot see?
My own eye.
You cannot see your own eye. And furthermore, nothing within the visual field itself allows you to deduce that it is being seen by an eye. The eye is not an object within the visual field.
Right.
The eye is the limit of the visual field. It is the condition that makes the sight possible in the first place.
So Wittgenstein takes this biological fact and scales it all the way up to human consciousness. The self, the metaphysical subject, the I that is experiencing reality, isn't an object in the world that you can point to and analyze.
You can't put it on a slide.
Exactly. You can't put human consciousness under a microscope any more than your eye can look at itself without a mirror. The self is the limit of the world. It is the boundary that allows experience to happen, but it sits entirely outside the realm of things that can be logically pictured by language.
So you cannot speak about the boundary.
Yeah,
You can only speak about what is contained within it.
precisely.
Okay, I get it. The blueprint theory is incredibly elegant. It works perfectly in a sterile laboratory setting where we are just naming objects and describing their physical locations.
Yes, in a vacuum, it's flawless.
But the moment Wittgenstein actually walks into a rural Austrian pub or tries to teach a classroom of hyperactive children, that entire architectural masterpiece shatters.
It shatters completely.
Because, what about poetry? What about sarcasm? A blueprint is terrible for telling a joke. If I walk in out of a storm and say, "It's raining cats and dogs," there are no physical animals falling from the sky.
Right, the isomorphism is completely broken there.
The model fails. Did he really think 90% of human communication was just unsayable nonsense?
During his Tractatus years, yes. He truly believed ordinary language was hiding its true logical form, and that most philosophical problems arose from us trying to use language outside of strict factual reporting.
That sounds like a miserable, suffocating way to live.
It really was. It was an intellectual straitjacket.
Yeah.
And the frustration you're expressing right now is the exact friction that caused Wittgenstein to undergo his massive paradigm shift.
The great unraveling.
Right. He realized that a blueprint completely fails to capture the vibrant, messy, lived reality of human interaction. The model was just too pure. It ignored the oxygen of actual life.
Which brings us to the second half of his life. He starts writing what will become the Philosophical Investigations. Yeah. And he begins by basically attacking the very foundation of his younger self. The sources note he specifically targets St. Augustine here.
Yeah, Augustine had this classic, seemingly common-sense view of language. He described how an adult points to a physical table, says the word table, and the child learns the name. It's the object and designation model.
The assumption that every single word in our vocabulary has a physical or mental object that it directly points to.
Which is how we are all basically taught language, right? But Wittgenstein looks at this and realizes it is a profound trap. He says we are bewitched by the grammar of our own language.
Bewitched?
Yeah. Because the word table points to an object, we subconsciously assume every noun must point to an object. But try to find the physical object for the word hello.
Or perhaps, or ouch.
Or time. What is the physical, primitive object of time? When philosophers search for the thing called time, they tie themselves in agonizing knots.
Because they're looking for a physical object that doesn't exist.
Exactly. Wittgenstein says they're looking for a reference where none exists. The word time doesn't function like the word table, even though our grammar treats them similarly.
Okay, but if a word doesn't point to an object, if the blueprint is thrown out entirely, then how does a word mean anything at all?
He delivers his new axiom, meaning as use. The meaning of a word is not an abstract essence hovering in the universe. It is not an internal mental image you hold in your brain. The meaning of a word is simply its use in the language.
Meaning as use. Let's dissect the toolbox analogy from the text to see how this works mechanically, because this really helped me.
It was a great analogy.
So if you open a physical toolbox in your garage, the tools inside are wildly different, right? You have a hammer, a measuring tape, a chisel, and a pot of glue. They do entirely different things. You wouldn't pull out the pot of glue, try to smash a nail into a piece of wood with it, and then angrily declare this glue is broken.
No, because you wouldn't judge the glue by the operational standards of the hammer. They have different uses.
So words are the tools. The word table is the hammer. It is used to point to a physical thing so you don't stub your toe, but the word hello is the glue. Its use is to bind people together in a social greeting. You can't interrogate hello by asking what physical object it points to, just like you can't hammer a nail with glue.
That is the pivotal shift right there. Language is not a single monolithic system of logical picturing. It is a diverse collection of practical tools.
But I have to challenge this, because meaning as use sounds dangerously close to total anarchy.
How so?
If meaning is just how we use it, are we living in Alice in Wonderland? Like, can I just point to a shoe, use the word refrigerator, and demand that it means refrigerator?
No, because you cannot use a tool in a vacuum. A tool only has a function within an established practice. You can't declare a shoe as a refrigerator because the rest of the community will not participate in that usage with you.
Ah, okay.
Let's look at the pizza example from our sources to prove this. Why does the word pizza mean pizza?
Well, the young Wittgenstein would say because the auditory sound pizza maps directly onto the physical combination of baked dough, cheese and tomato sauce.
But the older Wittgenstein forces you to look at the context. Imagine you are sitting at a table in a crowded Italian restaurant. You look at the waiter and say the word pizza. The word doesn't mean pizza just because it names the object. It means pizza because of the incredibly complex social behavior surrounding it.
The coordination of action.
Yes, you are engaging in a shared human activity. You are navigating commerce. You are expressing a biological desire for food. You understand the role of a waiter versus a customer.
Right.
If you walk into a hardware store, picked up a wrench, and yelled pizza at it, the word loses its meaning completely.
Even though the physical object of a pizza still exists somewhere in the world, the word is dead in the hardware store because the social context is missing.
Exactly. So it isn't anarchy at all. Language is heavily structured. But it isn't structured by some invisible mathematical logic like the Tractatus claimed. It is structured by local, public, social rules.
We are playing by social rules, which introduces his concept of language games, or Sprachspiel. He argues that speaking a language is part of an activity. It's a practice.
And he lists dozens of these games to show how fractured and diverse they are. Giving orders is a language game. Making promises, joking, mourning, translating from one language to another, cursing, praying. They are all separate games.
And notice the friction between these games. The rules for the joking language game are completely different from the rules for the factual reporting language game.
Oh, absolutely.
If someone tells a joke with a brilliant punchline, and you interrupt to fact-check the historical accuracy of their setup, you haven't just been annoying. You have fundamentally misunderstood the game being played. You're basically trying to play tennis on a chessboard.
Which, to be fair, happens constantly in modern communication.
All the time on the internet.
Yeah. But this diversity creates a massive problem for traditional philosophy. Philosophers have what Wittgenstein called a craving for generality.
They want the one true definition.
Exactly. They want to find the pure essence of things. They assume that if we use the word game to describe all these different activities, there must be one single defining feature that every single game shares.
Well, let's test that essentialism. We have board games, card games, Olympic games, and ball games. What is the one essential thread that runs through all of them?
Think about it. Do they all involve a board? No. Are they all competitive? No. A child throwing a ball against a wall alone is playing a game.
Right. Is there always a winner and a loser? Ring-a-Ring-a-Roses doesn't have a winner.
Do they all require skill? What about a game of pure luck, like rolling dice?
There is literally no single feature present in every single thing we call a game.
Wittgenstein's command to us is, don't think, but look. Stop trying to deduce a hidden essence in your head and actually look at the phenomena in the world.
Just observe it.
Right, because when you look, the strict boundaries dissolve. Instead, you find a complex network of overlapping similarities. Board games share features with card games. Card games share features with sports. Sports share features with solo physical challenges. He named this concept family resemblance.
The braided rope analogy from the text makes the mechanics of this so clear. Think of a thick, strong rope used to moor a massive ship. The rope is incredibly strong, capable of holding thousands of pounds. But if you unravel it, there isn't a single continuous fiber that runs through the entire length of the rope from beginning to end.
The strength doesn't come from one master thread.
Exactly. The strength comes from the continuous overlapping of many different shorter fibers. Meaning works the exact same way. We don't need a single continuous essence to understand a concept. We just rely on the overlapping network of resemblances.
But this fluidity means that our perception of the world is entirely dependent on the language game we are currently engaged in. To illustrate this, the sources bring up the famous duck-rabbit optical illusion.
Oh, I love this one. It's the drawing where if you focus on the left side, the pointy bits look like a bird's beak, so it's a duck. But if you shift your brain, those same pointy bits become ears, and suddenly it's a rabbit looking to the right.
Wittgenstein used that illusion to prove a really profound point about human perception. We do not just see raw, objective data. Our interpretations alter the sensations themselves.
Wait, really?
Yes. You do not just see geometric lines on paper and then logically deduce a shape. You see as a duck, or you see as a rabbit.
The raw sensation cannot be separated from the interpretation. Think about how this applies to our daily lives. You receive an email from your boss that says, "Fine, go ahead."
Oh, no.
Right. Depending on the language game you are playing in your head, you either read that as genuine approval, the duck, or you read it as passive-aggressive irritation, the rabbit. The raw data, the literal letters on the screen, are identical. The reality is constructed by the game.
which meaning completely relies on these overlapping public social games. But this immediately raises the most difficult, controversial question of his entire later career.
What happens when we take language out of the public sphere entirely?
Right. What happens when you are entirely alone inside your own mind?
This brings us to the private language argument. And we really need to define our terms carefully here. A private language isn't me inventing a secret code for my diary, like replacing A with 7 and B with 8.
Right. A substitution cipher is just a translation of a public language. Anyone with enough time could crack it.
So what did he mean?
When Wittgenstein says private language, he means a language that is in principle impossible for anyone else to understand. A language where the words refer only to your own immediate, private, unshareable sensations.
The text uses the desert island diary thought experiment to test this. Let's really try to make this work. I am stranded on a desert island. I am completely alone.
Okay.
To keep my sanity, I decide to keep a diary of my internal sensations. One day, I feel a very specific, unique flutter in my stomach. I decide I am going to track this. I write the letter S in my diary to name this specific sensation.
So mechanically, what are you doing there? You are focusing your attention inward, you are mentally pointing to the sensation, and you are assigning it a sign. You are trying to establish a private rule.
Yes, I am the creator of the language, and I know what S means to me.
Well, Wittgenstein argues this is impossible. You have not created a meaningful sign at all.
Why not? If it happens again next week, I'll feel it, recognize it, and write S again.
How do you know you recognize it? How do you know a week later that the sensation you are experiencing is actually the exact same S sensation?
I remember what it felt like.
Yep.
I have my memory.
But your memory is the very thing being tested. You are using your memory to verify your memory. You have no independent external criterion of correctness.
Oh.
It's like buying several copies of the exact same morning newspaper to verify if the headline in the first copy is true.
Oh, man. That is a brutal analogy.
If you are the only entity in the universe who can judge if S is applied correctly, then whatever seems right to you will be right. And if whatever seems right is right, then the concepts of right and wrong lose all meaning entirely. Without the possibility of being corrected by an external source, the rule is an illusion.
Which brings us back to the beetle in the box from the very beginning of the deep dive. The agony of not being able to show anyone your beetle. But I have to push back on this on behalf of human biology. Because this argument feels deeply counterintuitive. It almost feels like he's gaslighting us.
How so? Tell me what you mean.
Well, if I have a terrible toothache, I know I have a toothache. The pain is agonizingly real. It dominates my entire reality. Are you telling me that my internal pain isn't real, or that my word for it is meaningless just because I can't physically hand you my pain to verify it?
This is where Wittgenstein is most frequently misunderstood. He is absolutely not saying your pain isn't real. The sensation is undeniably real to you. But he is asking a structural question. How did you learn the word toothache?
Well, I learned it when I was a kid. My jaw hurt, I was crying, I was holding my face, and my parents said, "Hey, do you have a toothache?"
Notice the sequence of events there. Think about what would happen if human beings never physically manifested pain. What if our biology was different, and we never groaned, never grimaced, never cried, never physically reacted to internal damage? Could you ever teach a child the word toothache?
No, because there would be nothing to point to. The parents would have no idea anything was wrong.
Exactly. The private sensation only gets its name because it is tied to public, outward expressions. The language game of pain fundamentally requires a public display. The word pain doesn't function primarily as a label for a hidden inner object. It functions as a sophisticated social replacement for the primitive biological act of crying.
Okay, let me make sure I'm locking this in. My pain is the beetle in my box. It exists. It hurts. But the word pain isn't a magical tether attached directly to my private nerve endings.
Right.
The word pain is a tool I use in the public world. I use it to get sympathy, to get medical help, to excuse myself from work.
The meaning is inevitably public. You cannot invent a language in isolation because language is a tool for social coordination.
And this is a huge, but if we can't trust our own private internal memory to enforce the rules of language, then who or what actually guarantees that we're ever following the same rules?
It's a terrifying question.
It leads us to a concept so destabilizing it feels like intellectual horror. Part 5, Kripke's monster.
Yes. We are talking about Saul Kripke, one of the most brilliant logicians of the modern era. He wrote a book examining Wittgenstein's private language argument, and he unearthed an interpretation so radical and terrifying that the philosophical community dubbed it Kripkenstein.
Kripke argues that Wittgenstein didn't just disprove private language, he accidentally exposed a massive paralyzing paradox about rule following itself.
Hmm.
It leads to a radical skepticism about whether meaning exists at all, even in math.
Let's plunge into the quaddition paradox. Imagine a skeptic approaches you and asks you to solve a really simple math problem, 68 plus 57.
Okay, I do the basic arithmetic in my head, carry the 1, and I say 125.
The skeptic says, wait, how do you know you were supposed to add them? Based on all your past behavior, maybe you were actually using a rule called quaddition.
Quaddition. And the rule for quaddition is if you are adding any numbers smaller than 57, you use normal addition. But if either number is 57 or larger, the answer is always 5.
Now, obviously, this sounds insane.
Totally insane.
But the skeptic presses you. They say, look, you are a finite human being. You have not performed every single addition problem in the universe. Let's assume you've never explicitly added 68 and 57 before in your life. In fact, let's assume every addition problem you've ever done in the past happened to involve numbers smaller than 57.
So the skeptic is saying, all my past behavior every time I did math in school is 100% consistent with the rule of quaddition.
Yes, your past actions do not eliminate quaddition. So the skeptic challenges you. Look inside your mind. What ultimate objective fact about your brain definitively proves you meant plus and not quas?
I want to say I have a mental image of the plus sign.
But the skeptic replies, the plus sign is exactly what is under debate. How do you know your mental image of a cross doesn't mean quaddition?
So I say, well, I have a past intention. I intended to always add.
Your past intentions were formed when you were only dealing with numbers under 57. They fit quaddition perfectly. Try to answer it, you can't.
The epistemological void here is genuinely terrifying. There's nothing inside my own head that guarantees I'm following the rule I think I'm following. If I look inside, I find no absolute foundation. Kripke implies that on an individual, private level, there is no such thing as meaning.
It threatens to dissolve all of human communication into just meaningless noise. Now, it must be stated that scholars like John McDowell argue forcefully against Kripke. They claim he misreads Wittgenstein, that Kripke is looking for a mechanistic guarantee of meaning that was never necessary in the first place. But even as a thought experiment, it perfectly isolates the friction of how rules actually work.
So how do we survive this? How do we escape the monster?
We escape through Wittgenstein's externalism and the concept of the form of life. The solution to the paradox is abandoning the search inside your own head. You do not follow rules privately. Rule following is a social custom.
So when I say 68 plus 57 is 125, I am not correct because of a hidden neurological fact. I am correct because I am bracing myself against the social friction of the world.
Precisely. You appeal to the community. If you walk into a cafe, hand the barista 68 cents and then 57 cents, and demand a $5 coffee based on quaddition, the barista will not give you the coffee.
They'd look at me like I was crazy.
Right. The community corrects you. Your answer aligns with the established practices, customs, and judgments of the human mathematical community.
Language requires agreement. But the text makes a vital distinction here. It isn't just a polite agreement on dictionary definitions. It requires agreement in judgments and ways of living.
It is deeply anthropological. Language only functions because it is rooted in our biology, our physical environment, and our shared human activities.
Which illuminates another incredibly famous Wittgenstein quote from the text. If a lion could speak, we could not understand him. I used to think this just meant lions would talk about boring lion things, like hunting. But it is so much deeper than that.
Unpack it. Why couldn't we understand a talking lion?
Because it's like trying to interpret a sport where you can't see the field, you can't see the players, and you don't even know what gravity is on their planet. The words might translate mechanically. We might use an algorithm to decode that a specific roar translates to the English word zebra, but the life doesn't translate.
The lived context is completely alien.
A lion's world is driven by apex predation, pack hierarchy, and raw survival on the savanna. Their language games would be based on a form of life so completely removed from ours that even if they spoke perfect English, their concepts of justice, boredom, or forgiveness would be utterly incomprehensible to us. We don't share the same physical grounding.
The sources highlight the concept of death to hammer this home. Every human culture on Earth shares the biological reality of mortality. We are fragile, we bleed, we die.
Right, but the meaning of the word death, the grief, the elaborate religious rituals, the existential fear, the writing of wills, all of that relies entirely on our shared human form of life.
If you remove the vulnerability of the human body, the word death is just an empty string of letters. The words translate, but the life doesn't.
And this brings us to the absolute climax of our deep dive, because this reliance on a shared physical, biological form of life raises an immediate, massive problem for the modern world. We are entering an era where entities are speaking to us, but they have no life at all.
We're talking about large language models, AI, ChatGPT.
The sources include a fascinating academic study on AI and psychotherapy. It applies Wittgenstein's theories directly to LLMs, and the alignment is honestly chilling.
Wittgenstein's framework is uniquely suited to decode the illusion of AI. Think about the physical reality of an LLM. It does not have a body, it does not breathe, it has never felt a toothache, it has never eaten a pizza in a crowded restaurant, and it cannot die. What it does is map statistical relationships between words across billions of texts.
It has mapped out millions of human language games.
Because LLMs are trained on the overlapping threads of family resemblances in human text, they are absolute masters of imitation. They calculate the statistical probability of which token comes next in a specific game. They can play the apologizing game perfectly without ever actually feeling regret.
They are doing the math of language. It's almost like they operate entirely within the rigid logical realm of the early Tractatus. But the study argues that they fundamentally lack the lived context of the later investigations. They have no form of life.
This distinction becomes critical, not just philosophical, but practically dangerous when we look at the study's focus on clinical psychology. We are seeing AI used as therapists, and the LLMs display incredible linguistic fluency. They generate sentences that sound perfectly, deeply empathetic.
If I tell an AI I am grieving, it will say, "I am so sorry you're experiencing this pain." Grief can feel incredibly overwhelming.
But the researchers emphasize that this simulated empathy fundamentally diverges from therapeutic empathy. True psychotherapy is not a data transfer. It is an embodied co-regulation. It requires a therapist who shares the human experiential dimension. A human therapist knows what fear feels like as a tightening in the chest. They share the biological reality of mortality.
But I have to push back on this because I can just hear Silicon Valley developers screaming at their speakers right now. If meaning is use, as Wittgenstein himself said, and the AI uses the words correctly to make a patient feel better, does it really matter if it has a form of life?
It's a fair question.
If the AI successfully prevents a panic attack through text, isn't the grammar of the game all that matters?
It is the ultimate modern counter-argument. But the Wittgensteinian response is that language is the coordination of action in a shared world. When an LLM generates a grammatically flawless paragraph about grief, the structure is perfect, but it is entirely hollow. Why? Because the AI has no beetle in its box.
Wow, it has no private internal state to anchor the public words.
It has no internal state, no vulnerability, no skin in the game. The grammar of its empathy is a statistical illusion. I'll give you a mechanical analogy. It's like an incredibly talented actor playing a heart surgeon on a television show. The actor can recite the complex medical jargon perfectly. They can mimic the furrowed brow of deep concentration.
Right.
But if you actually start bleeding out on the stage, their words are utterly hollow. They cannot save you because they don't have the form of life of a surgeon. They are just imitating the game.
And without that physical anchor, the system breaks down when it faces reality. This completely explains why LLMs hallucinate, why they confidently give dangerously wrong medical advice or invent fake legal precedents. They lack the physical world constraints that force human language to align with reality.
A human is anchored by the physical consequences of being wrong, and AI is just probabilistically predicting the next token in a sequence. It is playing the game without ever being on the field.
The prescience of Wittgenstein here is staggering. Nearly a century ago, he warned us that severing language from lived human practice would lead to profound bewilderment. We would become bewitched by our own grammar. And today, we are staring at machines that output perfect grammar, and we're completely bewitched into believing there is a mind behind the text.
We project a soul onto the math, but Wittgenstein commands us to look at the use. Look at the form of life. There is no life there.
We have covered immense ground today. We started with the young architect of logic, trying to map the universe with a rigid blueprint, defining the absolute limits of what could be said. We watched that blueprint shatter, giving way to the messy, beautiful toolbox of the philosophical investigations. We explored how we play overlapping language games, how private languages are impossible, and how Kripke's monster threatens the very concept of rules.
And we anchored all of it in the realization that our words only possess meaning because of our shared, fragile, human form of life.
Which brings us to why this matters to you listening right now. This isn't abstract theory. Every single time you send an email to your boss, every time you argue with your partner or post a comment online, you are engaging in a language game. So much of our daily conflict happens because we are playing different games without realizing it. You're playing the venting game, and your partner is playing the problem-solving game. Recognizing the social rules of the game you are actually in is the only way to achieve real communication.
It demands that we pay attention to the context, not just the definitions.
And I want to leave you with one final thought to chew on as you go back into the world. Early Wittgenstein told us that the limits of my language mean the limits of my world. Today, we spend hours every single day communicating through algorithms. We rely on autocomplete. We use AI to draft our emails. These systems are statistically designed to predict the most average, likely, mathematically safe word to say next. If our language limits our world, and we are increasingly outsourcing our language to machines designed to be perfectly average, are we artificially shrinking the limits of our own reality?
We might be building a smaller world without even noticing.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the philosophy of language. Keep examining the tools in your toolbox and pay attention to the games you are playing.